countries. We have photographers from Tunisia, Lebanon, Iraq, the UAE, Turkey, and Iran. And they turn their cameras on these unique environments, exploring the ecosystems along rivers and bodies of water. And in some cases, they explore the absence of water. And their work bears witness to the ecological and cultural landscapes that are always shifting in the region, and give those of us here in Washington kind of insights into how people are living amidst their environments in the Middle East these days. I want to thank our curator, Roy Saadeh, for his vision in bringing this very beautiful show together. Roy is an interdisciplinary artist who works at the intersection of graphic design, photography, and the arts. And that passion of his and his intersectionality is very much on display in this show. You'll see, appreciate not just the photography, but the way it is hung on the wall. So thank you, Roy, for your vision, for your artistry, for working so beautifully with us. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts and the thoughts of our participating artist, Tamara Abdelhadi, who you'll meet later in this program. I also want to acknowledge and thank our partner. Where is she? Suraya Shaheen. Is she here? Of Tribe. Tribe is a nonprofit platform focused on documenting photography and film and video from the Arab world. And Suraya is the photo editor, as well as the kind of the heart and soul of Tribe magazine. And you'll see some of the magazines out front. It's a wonderful publication. I also want to note that this is MEI's 10th exhibition since we opened in the fall of 2019. And so if there's any champagne, maybe we could pop a bottle. And, you know, in each, we put so much thought and effort into each exhibit. We incubate most of them here. We don't get them from somewhere else. We think of them, we find the curator, we work with the curator, and it's mainly Lynn Snej, our amazing Arts and Culture Center director, who is leading this process. And she does so much with her vision and her passion and her blood and her sweat. And of course, each show seeks to communicate a message about just the incredible vitality of the arts and artists from the region. Each show tries to underscore the fact that artists in the Middle East are grappling with universal issues and topics like climate change, like sustainability, as you'll see in this show. And each show offers really a platform for dialogue between, you know, Americans and people from the Middle East. So if you love these shows, please consider supporting our gallery. We do not have a benefactor. We have to raise money for each and every show. So please consider supporting us. And I'd like to note that this show is supported by our board member, Ann Kaiser, for which we're very grateful. Just in other culture news, look out for the panels that will be taking place around the show. We'll be doing virtual Q&As and discussions with other artists in the show. Sometime in October, we'll be hosting another comedy show, Middle East comedy show. We've had a couple so far. They are packed, sold out, hilarious shows, an hour of laughter and hilarity followed by dancing. So if you see that flyer, buy those tickets immediately. And then in late October, I think it's October 27th, we're hosting a concert at the Barns at Wolf Trap, featuring the New York Arab Orchestra and Laith Sadiq. So please look out for that flyer. So thank you again for joining us. And now I'd like to turn the show over to Lynn Snej. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for your introduction. And yeah, I want to welcome again our guests tonight, curator Roy Saadeh and artist and photographer Tamara Abdelhadi. I'm so happy you're with us today. I'm so happy to be sitting down with you to talk about this beautiful show. Roy, thank you. You've brought together this wonderful show, and you're going to take us downstream and on some of those rivers of the Middle East. But you also not only curated this beautiful show. Can people not hear me? No. Okay, I'll try to have it closer. Okay, it's the way it's. Okay. So if people missed it, I was thanking profusely our curator, who is curated a beautiful show taking us downstream on many rivers in the Middle East, and to discover not only stories about those rivers, but the communities that live alongside those banks often, and the stories that they have as well. Not only did you do that, but you also brought into our orbit a group of artists that are so wonderful, and we are very thankful for that. And Tamara Abdelhadi, your work, which is, I have to say, a work that is presented by both Tamara Abdelhadi and Roy Saadeh, who are partners in work, but also partners in life as well, and vision. And that work, Choreography of the Euphrates, is beautiful, and I think we'll get the chance to talk about your work. Before we get right into the conversation, I want to just introduce you briefly. I know Kate introduced Troy as an interdisciplinary artist interested in the intersectionality between graphic design, photography, and the arts. He's also interested in finding and creating ways to resist systems of domination and inequality. As a photographer, Saadeh's work attempts to investigate individual and collective identity through the documentation of social and personal encounter. Thank you for being with us, Roy, again. Tamara Abdelhadi is an Iraqi photographer whose work is concerned with the historic and contemporary representation of her own culture in all of its diversity. Along with being a photographer, Tamara is also an educator who has taught in Palestine, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, the UAE, Kuwait, Tunisia, and Canada. And her works have been exhibited many places worldwide. She also has a debut monograph, Picture an Arab Man, that was published in 2022, and we have a copy of it in the exhibition. And I'll be talking very briefly to Tamara about it as well. So I want to turn to you first, Roy, and let's start at the beginning. Why don't you, in your own words, frame this beautiful show for us? Tell us what is it about, and how many artists are in it, how many works, what are the main themes, and what are the main stories that this show is telling?
Thank you very much. Thank you, MEI, for this opportunity. I'm very happy to be here for the first time. So briefly, the project came as I'm personally very interested in the theme, the water, and the relationship between the human relationship with our environment. And so if I want to go back more, I would say that I have this quote that always comes back to me. I think it's by Heraclitus, the Greek philosopher, that says something around no man can ever step in the same river twice, as it's not the same river and it's not the same man. And that speaks to the idea, this speaks to me a lot, first to the idea that we're always changing. There's always a transition, and that we can never go back to the past, always to the future. And this, I think, speaks also to how the title came to be. So a river flows downstream is, I would say, has two folds. One, that everything is shifting around us, especially in this era. We're always looking at new grounds. We're looking at new landscapes. People are displaced. Nature is in danger. There's climate change. People are losing their villages and their houses, displaced from very different reasons. Two, I feel like the river, at the end of the river, is almost like the future. It's like where our ancestors went to, and we're following them in a sense. And that the message basically is that as much as we would like to control things, at the end of the day, the river takes us into these twists and turns. And we have to have this faith that we can plan for a good future. And so the project came very, I would say, natural to me to look at projects that work around the theme of water and water crisis and climate change. And I want it to be diverse as possible, and not specifically about a river, but the symbol of a river, what a river mean. And so there's projects about different things, but they're all connected around the abundance of water that plays a very critical role.
The abundance, as in also sometimes the abundance being a crisis by itself, right? A lot of, some of the projects highlight the scarcity of water and its impact. And some, like, maybe you can talk a little bit about Emin Osman's, the Turkish, where it is actually the abundance and the flood that has created a crisis.
Yeah, this abundance is made, I would say, by humans who have agendas or trying to, let's say, create dams to around the river. And this is the result of this big project in the Anatolian region, hydraulic and irrigation systems. And so Farewell, this project by Emin Osman, document this crisis and how people are losing their villages, their houses, and floodings in even historical places.
Yeah, archaeological sites have been lost.
And not only the houses themselves. So they're going into a place that is completely different now, and full geography is shifting into something else.
Yeah.
At the same time, we have a project by Solmaz Daryani from Iran, who shows almost the opposite, where she documents a lake, Urmia, in Iran, one of the biggest salt lake in the world, drying almost to 80% of its volume, and creating a crisis because this is a very touristic place. A lot of people benefit from it. People come to swim and heal from the water, and that is almost contrast opposite. And actually, in both of the work, there's a photo, a very similar photo of shepherd and sheep. One that is passing a river of flood water, and the other are just passing a dry desert.
Space.
And that's very telling to what extent we're going to the extreme opposites.
Absolutely, thank you. We will come back to some more. I want to dig a little bit deeper into your curatorial sort of practice and the other themes that you're interested in. But I want to go to Tamara and Tamara, maybe you can tell us about the project that you have in the show with Roy, of course, that is titled Choreography of the Euphrates, where you document the Euphrates in Iraq, but you document it and you represent it, you plot it almost in a very different way. Talk to us a little bit about the project, its genesis, and what you were trying. What stories is this river saying in your project?
Can anyone hear me? Or is that?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you, first of all, Lynn, for that question and the invitation to be here. So the project that Roy and I collaborated on that we're showing is called the Choreography of the Euphrates, and that choreography meaning a mapping of the Euphrates. We began this project in 2022, and the inspiration behind this project is it is an ambitious attempt to map the entirety of the Euphrates River in Iraq. Basically through its people, its communities, its landscape, its wildlife, its marsh, and so what we wanted to do by mapping the Euphrates was to bring the river from its place in history to its place in the present, to speak more about the people that live around the river and the communities that live around the river today. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to not just document it, but also to create sort of a visual, not just story along the river, but also to have sort of this visual archive that we can then present open source to scholars, to environmentalists, to activists that may want visual representations of the route of the Euphrates today, not, you know, not the more historical visuals and not just Google Maps visuals. So that's really one of also the pushes to doing this project, because the Tigris, which is also another very important river, we felt had documentation done and a lot of activism around it. And we thought that the Euphrates didn't have as much. So we wanted to help with that.
How hard was it to take on this project? I mean, it's complicated to go and shoot in those areas, as we all know. I mean, tell us, you know, how you know, briefly, how hard it is and what are the next steps, right? Because I see that this is a project that has recently started and it's ongoing, right? So you want to go back and
yes, it's we began the project. So this, I would say, we've documented 2/3 of the Euphrates inside Iraq. How hard was it? I would say it's a mixture of extremely fun and enjoyable and like a privilege to be able to be in those areas, and also tiring, obviously, because it's a journey at the end of the day. But I like to highlight the idea of the privilege of being able to be in those places and meet those people and be welcome in their homes, and just also get to know a country, you know,
through
yeah, a place that I'm from originally, and Roy is, through my extension of me, is also connected to it now through its people and its land. So it's all really a journey in and of itself.
And it's a very different way of telling, you know, a historical narrative about a country, right? You're going there and meeting the communities and meeting the people.
Exactly.
Roy, I want to come back to you. You know, you mentioned that you know, you had an interest in water and in climate issues, and I understand. But you know, you know, there are so many photographers in the region working on this. There is so much work of young emerging photographers working on climate, documenting issues of environmental crisis, water crises, etc. Whereas this is a region that is relatively has done little awareness on these things because it's always, you know, dealing with other types of crises. What are the sort of conversations you are having or have had with those photographers? Why do you think there's so much work coming out? I mean, we could have had double the you know, the number of artists in this show. There is so much good work coming out of the region.
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, we were talking about it briefly, trying to pinpoint what could be the reason why. There's many. I think there's a surge in interest in documentary photography that has not been before in the region. We were always passive. Passive in that era. We were always looking at the West, but I also think recently, given that climate change hit places like our places more drastically than other places, like the Arab world, I think it basically documentary photographers are looking at the crisis around them, and therefore these crises are very visible, and they're trying to you know, highlight these issues and try to talk about something that is very tangible, very easy to see around us. But also it is not easy to do so when when there's so much scarcity in the resources and in being a photographer and be seen, I do think that there's a lot of photographers doing, but there's not enough amplification of the, not enough, I think.
Yeah.
And there's, as I said, many reasons why we don't have enough resources, maybe publishers, many platforms to do so.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'd certainly be working very hard to try to amplify the messages of those artists that we are showing at the Institute. Just before I go back to Tamara to talk about the broader practice that she works on, as a curator, what are some of the other themes that you're sort of working on, thinking about, or sort of grappling with at the moment that you would like to work on? Share some with us.
Okay, so I've been struggling with the idea that first, most of the time we're trying to represent ourselves or counter narratives that has been placed upon us, and I think that's a lot of hard work. At the same time, I feel that by doing so, we're cycling back to position ourselves on the margins of the conversation and not in the center of the conversation. And because of that, I decided recently, a year ago, I think, to start this photo book archive. Mainly because I work with photographers a lot. I edit and design their photo books. And I always notice that photographers from our region does not have knowledge about other photographers doing similar work. And this is circling back to your question. Most of the time they know about famous Western photographers, European, American photographers, French photographers. But for some reason, I mean, there is reasons behind that, they're not aware of people in their own circle, in their own country, in their neighboring country. So I'm from Lebanon, and I've never seen in my life a photo book from Syria. And I wonder why. What are these borders that are visible and invisible that stop us from having a conversation around us? Why we're always gazing to the West? That's, I think, a big question that, if you look deep down, they're harsh answers. And so my small gesture is to start this photo book archive and collecting photo books from our region. I have so far around 140 photo books. And they're all narrative-based photo books. And I've been sharing this list with people, artists, photographers I know, asking them to share with me what they know. And the approach is from a disability study approach, which is nothing about us without us. So the books are by people from the region, about the region. And not other way around, because you will find, a lot of photo books about Lebanon from all over the world, and not by people from Lebanon, and that's essential. And so this photo book archive is a traveling exhibition that goes from one place to another and has two folds: one, to inform other photographers from the region about their colleagues, and that they can find inspiration in their own country and in their own region, one, and two, hopefully also to disseminate these stories to around the world and introduce a more narrative-based representation of the countries by people from the countries to the world. And so this has been my passion recently.
That is a fantastic project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Tamara, I would like to you to share with us some of the, how does this project sit in your broader practice? What are the other sort of themes or projects that you've worked on? I first encountered your work through a project that was called War Remains in Iraq, which was pretty amazing. Maybe you can talk about it briefly, but feel free. I mean, this is a question for you to share with us, the broad themes of your practice and things that you work on as an artist or a photographer.
When I first started as a photographer, when I first became a photographer, I guess I gravitated more towards projects that I felt I wanted to see out there. So, and I think we do that a lot. As creatives, we want to fill a hole or a gap that we want of something that we want to see. So we create it, for example. And so one of the things that I was very interested in the beginning of my career as a photographer was to create more of a representation of the Arab man, which was when I worked on this project, Picture an Arab Man.
Which is the book that we have.
Yeah, which is the book that you mentioned, that is there with a few books from different artists in the exhibition. And so when I worked on projects, it was because I felt like I wanted to see it. And so if I didn't see it, then I created it. Not because I thought that I'm the best person that can create it, but because I thought it was an opportunity to create something, to photograph and document a subculture or, something that I was curious about, knowing more about. And I think as photographers, the curiosity is a very big part of who we are. And War Remains is a project or a series that I did in, I think, 2012 in Iraq, but it was in northern Iraq, in Iraq, in Kurdistan. And it was photos of basically remains of war machines from different wars. And it really was this huge graveyard of war machines that had overtaken the landscape. And that was the essence of me being a documentarian, seeing it and wanting to photograph it, because I was shocked at the size of it, and I wanted to share it.
Yeah, the photos are pretty shocking.
Yeah, and then it just continues on. As a photographer, I wanted to go to Iraq, which is where I'm originally from. I never lived there, and it was always in my heart and mind that I wanted to photograph and visit as a photographer, but I never did. So I went everywhere and I did projects and covered subjects everywhere but. And then in 2011 I went, and then in 2018 I went, and then in 2022 we went. So, and last month. So there was this side of me that then was able to photograph in my own country that is a part of what this project is, and another project I'm working on. And that's where that idea or that question of or that thing that I said about the privilege of being able to photograph and document something that is kind of very close to you.
Yes, it's a way of reconnecting.
And I
peace,
slowly did work until I got there, I think, until I was able to do that.
Sure.
Yeah, if I can draw the line of like beginning and photographing Arab men, and then continuing photographing barbershops in the Arab world, and just things that I was curious about and wanting to share, until I got to Iraq and was able to actually get to know my own country through my camera and also my partner. Yeah, it's the journey. It's
Good for you.
Good for me. Yeah, part of the journey.
I want to open the floor soon because I want to leave some, but just a closing question to both of you. I had some more things I wanted to discuss. Mainly, maybe we can discuss in the gallery, why did you decide to do a book on representing the Arab male? So I think you might get this question, but
Mm.
just a closing question to you too. This is, climate, water crises in the region are often, very scientific conversations. There are topics that are often discussed in scientific circles in a way that is often not very accessible, whatnot. What do you think as curators, artists, creatives, what is the role of photographers in this conversation? What is it that is important that they do? What do they bring to the table? Roy?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that the strongest thing we have as human beings is narrative, and we see governments trying to control narrative. We see individuals trying to control narrative, and I think artist has the means and the a way to tell a story which is easy to grasp, easy to understand in a different material, different platforms, different ways, and that will always be something that people connect to. And I always believe that if you can listen to someone's story, regardless of your prejudged
preconceived
you can always have empathy, and that's the power of photography and narrating stories.
Tamara, do you want to add a few
Yeah,
things?
I was just going to say, photographers work a lot of times tend to reflect their surrounding and their what's going on, the reality. So it's like they're a reflection of what's going on around us. And it's clear that it's getting more visually clear. You can see that before, the impact is more present visually. And so the images obviously is a visual language. It's a different kind of language, and it's more perhaps a faster, effective. And what's beautiful about these photographers, many of the photographers in the show that Roy curated, are photographing their lands and their their towns and their cities. So we have a intimate and personal knowledge of these, and that's what makes those photos special too, because we get that close connection to the images. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. I want to open the floor to a few questions before Roy heads to the gallery and takes us all on a tour of the show. Any questions from the audience? Any comments? Yes, Suraya. Wait for the microphone so that people can hear you.
Okay, well, thanks for both of you being here and Lynn for moderating. And I just have a question for, one each. So Roy, of all those books in the traveling exhibition of books, how many of them have you designed? Because I know that's part of your practice. And are you working on a new one? And for Tamara, I saw your work first at Slidefest in Dubai, and you were talking about the project, your book project. And then I traced it back, and I was trying to get a hold of it. And I traced it back to something, We Are the Medium. Is that a collective that you are, and would you talk about that?
So I've designed 2 or 3 of them, not more. And I hope to do more of that. Ironically, there's not enough, or there's not much design, photo book kind of design in the region. I think there's opportunity to have more, and this is like a message to photographers to work with their local designers and to look for publishers in their region rather than go to the West and look for a Western designer or looking for a Western publisher. I think when you do that, you lose a big audience in your own country, and you lose the possibility to connect with your colleagues and friends, community.
First of all, Slide Fest, yes, that was a while ago. Why didn't you say hi at Slide Fest? Yes, that was when I was still dreaming the project up, I guess. We Are the Medium is a family-run collective of artists. And we published the book through this very tiny publishing arm of We Are the Medium. So that's how it's connected. And We Are the Medium is based in Montreal. It's also connected to Maktaba Bookshop, which is also in Montreal. So yeah. And thank you for the support also of the book. Yeah.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, well, I want to thank you all for joining us. I want to thank our panelists. Let's all head to the gallery and have Roy take us on a journey, and I will sort of MC the process to make sure